So here we are talking about great things, and you know, Carole and Steve, I've been up here a few times before. I always love it when I come up here. We're in a special area. This is kind of a paradise of yours that you developed coming up here back in the 80s. And I mean, Steve, you were a winemaking, you know, you worked with Mondavi and you worked with all these great producers. What brought you guys up here to this mountain?
You want to tell them about the
We
crazy real estate agent we had?
We were just looking for a place to live. And so we started looking for property over here in Napa. And we looked at a total of 70.
Wow.
And this was starting in the fall of '85. This was about number 10 or 12, I think, in the whole thing. When we first saw it, it was laughable because it was 1.5 miles steep, winding, narrow, unpaved road. It was rocks and ruts to get up here. And I mean, totally laughable. And in fact, the place had been on the market for several years, and it was so difficult to access that
we were the only ones to ever
actually
make
got
it
all the
all
way
the way
this
up to the
high,
house to look
actually
at it.
got to the place.
And that was in December of 1985.
Wow.
And so by the time we looked at an additional 60-some properties, we finally decided this actually represented a pretty good value. You can change roads, you can change houses, but it's a great piece of land.
Yeah.
So we made an offer and they accepted it, and we've been up here for 35 years.
There were no grapevines here at all. There was a house that the previous owner had built as a spec house, expecting that it was going to be a real hot property and people would jump at it. And he didn't realize that the road, the rocks and ruts, 1.5 miles long, steep, narrow, winding road, was going to be such a negative. But it was. Nobody wanted to tackle that road except Steve and me.
Yeah, well, you're adventurers. I mean, what can we say? You know, for everyone that's not here, I mean, what I love about this piece of property is we have an amazing sweeping view of the valley floor down below us, and we can see into the Vaca Mountains. We are in the Mayacamas Mountains right here. Obviously, you've made a huge impact in Zinfandel. But DNA, we talk about the DNA of grapes and how they're related to each other, and why Pinot Noir is the genus of like Chardonnay and Pinot Gris and Pinot Meunier are related to that. Zinfandel was a mystery to all of us. You went out there and you really worked on this, you know, a number of years ago, and you kind of solved that, you know, that mystery. Tell everyone about that.
Zinfandel has been a very important variety in California for well over 100 years. Its European origin was not known, and so other grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon or Riesling, they use the same name in Europe, so it's really obvious where it's from. But with Zinfandel, because there was no grape in Europe called Zinfandel, people thought, well, maybe it's just a California native grape. This is California's own grape. But any grapevine biologist or anybody who really knows grapes from a technical point of view knows that this is a European grape. The Native American grapes don't look like this. This is a European grape. So it's just a matter of finding where in Europe it came from, and it's not going to be, we're not going to find it by asking people where's Zinfandel, because that's not a name they use. So we began to connect it to, we initially connected it to Italy because there's a grape in Italy called Primitivo. Yep. And we learned in the 70s that Primitivo was the same grape as Zinfandel, just going by a different name. But that clearly wasn't its original home, because the Italians had documents saying, no, this just came to Italy in the 1700s. So by the time I got involved, we knew that Primitivo was the same grape. And I thought, we have these new DNA tools. These tools enable us to study a DNA profile of a grape in one place, the DNA profile of a candidate grape in another place, and say, are you the same? As we studied the Italian history, we looked at a map, and where Primitivo was grown in southern Italy is just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Dalmatian coast of Croatia. Right. So we began to look there. There was already a grape in Croatia called Plavac Mali, which was the most prominent red wine grape of the Dalmatian coast. But we were able to demonstrate very early on in our pursuit, which started in the late 90s, that Plavutz Mali was not Zinfandel, but that it was a genetic relative. And so that said to us, if Zinfandel came from anywhere, it's going to be somewhere in this part of the world. And so I was very fortunate to make a connection with some Croatian scientists who actually were looking for my help on another matter. And so we started working together. And it took us about 3 years looking through a whole bunch of old vineyards in Croatia, making DNA profiles of all their grapes. And eventually, after 3 years, we found Zinfandel in Croatia. The oldest known name for Zinfandel was Tribodrag. And so what we have Zinfandel right here. This is what's right behind us. We decided to call the wine that we make from these Zinfandel vines, we decided to call it Tribodrag as kind of an homage to the history and the respectability and the nobility of this grape.
Zinfandel is California's state grape, and Zinfandel was the grape of the old days. You know, that and Petit Syrah is what you saw all growing here. It was not Cabernet Sauvignon, was not the big thing. And when you had all the jug wines in the old days, what do you think they were made with? What do you think, you know, Hardy Burgundy was made with? Pinot? Nope. It was Zinfandel, you know, and so it made California's wine culture grow, and it blossomed around Zinfandel.